right, hello and welcome to H&D Abroad. I am Herman, half of the H&D Abroad duo. Welcome to all those who are here to join with us today. As you can see, I am alone. The lovely Dee is taking a personal day today, which she has well earned. So we're going to manage this conversation alone. I'll try not to fumble the ball too much. As you can see, the bright sun is shining on us. We went live, she and I, earlier for a little while on Instagram this morning. So if you want to get a chance to see a little bit of the scenery from our Airbnb, you can see that on what we posted today on Instagram. So here on H&D Abroad, we chose to have this channel to share our walk, our journey to move abroad to another country. The process in which we go through that. When we started this, we didn't see a lot of Black couples making this move. And so we jumped in, and more than just that we've moved, this is the process walking all the way through. So we haven't picked a place yet. We're narrowing it down. We're actually abroad right now on vacation. We're moving through parts of South America. And there'll be videos about that. We're ending our last day here in San Jose, Costa Rica. And in this engagement, we've built a community, which is you. And these are all conversations that we have that have helped to build our experience as we make these plans to move abroad. And in turn, hopefully, to inspire those who are moving abroad to engage in this conversation as well. So if that sounds of interest to you, and we hope it does, we ask you to hit the like button. You don't have to do it later. You don't have to consider it. It is a thing. Hit the like button. And then please subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification bell so that you know when we go live. We go live every Saturday, mostly every Saturday, from 1 p.m. Central, that's 2 p.m. Eastern, as well as some Monday nights where I do a Man Monday, and Thursday nights where Dee does a women's health care. Occasionally, we do a few Tuesdays as well. If you're visiting us from the future, you're watching this after the live has gone off, we ask you to go into the comments section and hit hashtag replay. We love our replay gang. Give us a shout out and give us comments. We always reply to all the comments that we have. Today already in the chat, we got Miss Tanya. Hello, Tanya, and I'll let her say hi to her our guests for the day who'll be with us, who I'll introduce shortly. And the lovely Jice. You all need to go over there to Jice and visit her channel. She's got two doing big things, and we always want to support our fellow content creators. Okay, straight to and there's Broad Ability. Hey, my Broad Ability, great to have you here today. All right, so going to jump right in and bring in our guest today. So our guest with us today is Mr. Jice Stokes, known also as Charlotte Rattler here. He has been a constant addition to our conversation over these last several months, and it was a great opportunity to bring him on here today. Hey, Diane, good to see you there today. So he and Dee were in these little conversations, and I, as always, I'm backdoored into the conversation. But we'll start off with, before we get too deep, go ahead, Jice, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, first of all, thanks for having me. I've been a fan of you and Dee, been watching y'all, I think the last 2 years. Fan of your page and your YouTube channel. So thanks for the invite. My name is Jice Stokes, currently reside in Charlotte, North Carolina. My wife and I recently started our YouTube channel, probably about 2 months ago now. It's called GenX Quench. And really what our channel is about is for those of you in Generation X, is geared toward you all. I'm a brand ambassador. I got my brand on, rocking my Quench shirt today, but GenX Quench is the name of our YouTube channel. And it's really aimed at people who were born 1965, 1980-ish time period, who are now kind of reaching that pre-retirement phase where you're thinking, what is the next phase of life post-work life? So is it traveling? Is it retirement? Getting your money right for retirement? Those are the types of topics we talk about. And this, I would say, environment in the USA right now. One of the things we've been looking at is investigating residencies and potential citizenships abroad for life post-corporate America. So that's really what our channel's about. And I'm only one half of my channel because my wife is taking care of her mother in Louisville, Kentucky. And to my rattler out there, my fellow rattler, hello, and keep striking. So.
All right. You got a couple of high yellow Florida boys on here today.
Palm Beach and Dade County in effect.
Yeah, no doubt. We're going to try to stir it up. Hey, Lori Butler, good to see you here today. Okay, so the title of today is From DNA to Diaspora, Black Heritage Abroad. And if you all had the opportunity of listening to our conversation last week with Barbara Sutton, you can tell it's a pretty hot topic when we talk about the possibilities of considering our mother homeland of Africa as a potential place for moving abroad. And in that process, if I'm understanding correctly, Jice, you began to look at trying to find out what your heritage was in tracing that back. So give us a little bit of history on that.
Yeah, I guess it started with, as Lynn and I were looking at potential residencies, et cetera, the majority population a lot of times has heritage, somewhere in Europe. A lot of times it's like England or Germany and Italy, and a lot of those countries have opportunities where people can get citizenship through their parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, et cetera. So that kind of caused me to pause to say, as African Americans, we don't know from where we originate other than a continent, which is 54 countries. So that's a lot of places to potentially originate from. So with that being said, I started looking at, okay, what is my DNA? What's the composition? And I started with a more generic DNA test called MyHeritage. It's like $30-40. And what I noticed was I was like 40% Nigerian and about 13% or so Sierra Leone. And then I started researching countries in Africa that may have ancestry. And the only one that I saw that had a defined process was Sierra Leone. So that sparked my interest. And as I started researching it further, what I found, one of the requirements was you have to take the African ancestry DNA test. I took and their test is a little bit different. The generic DNA test will do kind of your total DNA composition, whereas African ancestry, you either take your father's side or your mother's side, or you can do both. That's double the cost. I started with my father's side and found out his, basically going back 5 generations, his father's father was from a Western African country called Guinea-Bissau, which was a former Portuguese colony. So that didn't work, and they don't have the ancestry citizenship. So, but I saw Sierra Leone was one that had it. So I said, it must be on my mom's side. So I ended up taking the African ancestry test for the mother and found out that was bingo. That was where, from whence I originated, 5 generations on the maternal side in the Timni tribe. And I should have said this, in Guinea-Bissau, I was the Balanta tribe through my father's heritage. So that was kind of the genesis of this. But also, and I think I've told you all this, looking at residencies, we also looking at Latin America too. But I'm studying African American history in college, taking a few FRM classes. I was always intrigued by Marcus Garvey, his Pan-Africanism view, and hey, we should return there. Those are our roots. And fascinated with the history of Liberia, where they were trying to get Americans to repatriate Africa. So that kind of just having that knowledge and that history, it's always intrigued me to visit the continent one day. I have not yet made it, but through this process, I'm hoping that I can do a return trip or a trip there and also get citizenship potentially one day.
Okay. I'm going to stop a quick second because there's two points I want to make sure I say before we go any further.
Okay.
These next several weeks, Dee and I will have several content presentations that are around Africa. Even though right now we are evaluating the process for African countries and looking at Africa as a perspective, we are not a country-specific content page. Our page is about exploring options throughout the world because we are global citizens. So I wanted to make sure, if you're looking at us and you're watching us, that hold on, because we're going to do some heavy African content the next several weeks on and off, but we are exploring the world. Second, Jice and I will name a few different ancestry companies in this conversation today. We are not affiliates of any of those companies. We are not getting paid by any of those companies. This is just Jice's experience and our understanding as we're learning about avenues that are available to us. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there before we went any further. Hey, Dr. Linda, good to see you. Okay, so you're a Black man in America, and you say to yourself, we're going to move. Why not explore this option? Was it motivated simply by the need to move, or what was the innate motivation that said, I need more information?
Yeah, I think for us post work life and wanting to see the world, it's just the ability to move freely within the world. Like you say, be world citizens. One of the things I noticed was once you get a Western African citizenship, there's a united group of countries called ECOWAS, which is right now I believe is comprised of 11 countries, and all Western Africa, and they allow you to travel freely if you have a passport with any of those nations. So as a potential world traveler going forward, hey, if I get Sierra Leone citizenship, that will allow free movement within all of pretty much Western Africa, which is great. Kind of like if you think about the European Union, how folks can move between those countries and not have to get visas, et cetera, pay for visas and move freely. That was a benefit. Another benefit within at least Sierra Leone, if you get citizenship, they encourage people from the diaspora who get citizenship to potentially purchase land or start businesses. So again, don't know that would be the ultimate home or not, but that was appealing if something were to happen in the United States and you need a place to go to call home, and then you have the birthright to it through your ancestry. Why not? I joke to some of my friends. I don't know if any of you watch any of the Marvel movies, but remember how Thanos was going through the universe collecting infinity stones in his glove? Well, I kind of say I want to collect residencies and citizenships like that to have my own gauntlet to be able to travel wherever I want to go. So,
listen, I already bought my glove. I'm just waiting for the stones.
Okay, there you go. Got to get the stones now.
He's got to get the stones. So you get this information, and it gives you a beginning information and opens the door of a country of origin.
Yep.
Was that an emotional moment? What was the impact?
It was exciting, to tell you the truth, because one, not knowing countries of origin, like I started doing all this history. First, it was Guinea-Bissau. Like, okay, let me do all this research. So I'm sending YouTube videos to my parents, my sister, like, hey, we're from the Balanta tribe. Here's the information about the Balanta tribe. And they were a warrior people. They resisted slavery. It was like really cool to learn about their history. And then, finding about the Timne tribe, a lot of them were agricultural and they grew rice. And a lot of those people were brought to the U.S. in the Gullah region, to grow rice in South Carolina, Georgia, et cetera. So it kind of makes sense once you start learning your history, because my dad's people are from Georgia. So I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. And you start connecting puzzle pieces in terms of the African continent, and then now, okay, the U.S., the 400 years since we've been on this continent. So it was definitely exciting. And I was also excited by the fact that if I ever went to Sierra Leone, I could actually communicate with the people. I think it would have been a little bit more difficult in getting to South because it was a Portuguese colony. So the language barrier would have certainly been there, whereas Sierra Leone was a former British colony. So English is one of their official languages. So in terms of that being an open door too, to be able to communicate once I get over there, that would be exciting.
Okay. So for those who don't understand the process, who haven't attempted the ancestry process, because it's so many of them out there, what in general, because you mentioned, you looked at your father's side and you looked at your mother's side. Give us a general flow of how the ancestry process works.
Yeah, well, I guess knowing what I know now, I would have done it differently.
Okay.
And what I would have done was started with the more generic. So I did do that part. Start with the generic DNA test. And again, they don't pay me in terms of which one to use. I happen to use MyHeritage, which I knew had Sierra Leone as one of their countries they do have DNA samples from. So if you do have that in your history, that would be a suggestion. I'm not paid by them though, but if you want to see if you have Sierra Leone somewhere in your DNA, that would be one you could use. You can research others to see if they have that as well. I'm just familiar that they do have it. And like I said, the price was $30-$40 for it. But there's an aha with that, or a gotcha too, in that those general DNA tests, I think they do redefine print. And I think you can maybe check in terms of what you want them to do with your DNA afterwards, because sometimes they'll sell information, et cetera. So I want people to be aware of that. What I do like about African ancestry is they destroy the samples. They don't do anything once they're done telling you your information is done, over and done with. But I needed to know, okay, do I have Sierra Leone, to try to go through that process? So that was the first thing. The second thing is then I had to take an African ancestry DNA test to do it. Now, knowing what I know, they have statistics that generally, if you're African American and both parents are African American, generally speaking, statistically, your mother has a higher percentage chance of being more African in her DNA, like I would say closer to 88%, whereas generally in America, if you're foundational Black American, you're basically, your ancestors brought you through slavery. Your father is closer to like 82%. So if you don't know which one to take, I would say guess your mother's side, because you have a higher stat that it'll be more African and not get a European sample back, because there are chances where people are predominantly African DNA, but when they take their African ancestry test, it'll say you were Portuguese, Spanish, going back on your father's side. So if you have to guess and you don't know which one to pick, I would say guess your mother first, which is what I should have done, but I didn't know that at the time. After I did research later, I discovered that. So that's one thing. And then what I would also suggest is if you have any siblings or relatives that you have a similar ancestor and you want to go in half on the test, that would be something you could do to cut your costs. Like each test for African ancestry, your mother's test or your father's test, is $300. That's not a cheap test to take. So if you can get some relatives to go in with you on the test, for instance, my sister can't take the paternal test because she doesn't have the chromosome of a male on her. Now she could ask my dad to take it or get me to take it. So me having taken it, I told her results and said, hey, I can get you your certificate as well. I didn't make her pay for it, but that's something I could have said, hey, you want to go in half because you can't take the father's test, but I can. And you'll get the benefit of the male results knowing. So that's something to defer cost as well for people. knowing what I know now. And then there's then you mentioned the process. So, okay, once you had the result, if you get it confirmed, yes, I have the Sierra Leone citizenship through whichever tribe. You're going to need to get a few things to actually apply for the citizenship. A letter from, basically, you're going to create a letter. I almost equate it to a cover letter, name, address, date, and you're going to address it to the Sierra Leone government, Monuments and Relics Commission with why do you want citizenship? Why should you get citizenship? And stating that you have ancestry there. So why would you want it? Hey, I discovered I was a descendant of the such and such tribe. I want to connect with my people that I've never known. This has always been a hole in my history, wanting to know my ancestry. I may want to purchase land or start a business or do, give back to the community there. So whatever your reasons are, they're personal. You just lay them out there. So you would need to get that, a copy of your ancestry results, which is a certificate. And I'll give you an example. Here's what mine looks like. But it gives you it's got the raised seal there. Mm-hmm. So that you would have that. You need to get your birth certificate, which should be in your same name as your passport. You got to have your bio page from your passport you'll need. You'll also need to get 2 notarized letters from people of what they call high moral standards or high reputation. So people like your pastor, your bishop, your employer, a lawyer, CPA. So any of those kind of people. And then you'll need to get an FBI background check and a state criminal check as well. And those are the documents you would need. Yep.
Okay, so that's a good start. Okay, so hold on, let's ask this question is there a minimum percentage requirement?
I would say if you see something pop, I would say, and I'm guessing, I'm not a genealogist or a DNA expert, but I think it's probably closer to that 10 to 13%. If you see something, and I think that's significant enough that it would show up on African ancestry.
Okay. All right. So in this conversation, there are several former colonizing countries who are putting out to the world that if there are countries that were formerly colonized by them, that they could go through the process of getting citizenship in that primary country. Spain is one of them, to use as an example. So we watch Everything is Bofo. It's a couple from the Philippines who have moved to Spain, and they got their citizenship in Spain because the Philippines used to be a former colony. A part of this conversation, the depth of this conversation, is because it appears that there is that outreach is not showing up in Africa. And there are limited places that are making that process available in Africa. And so you've been mentioning Sierra Leone because it has been one of those places. Are there others?
I can tell you Benin announced, I want to say 2 months ago, that they were going to do something similar, but I don't think they've defined that process. So I would say stay tuned and keep researching if you get Benin to pop up in your genealogy. Guinea-Bissau, I think, said 2 years ago they were going to do it. And I know, I want to say there were 23 people who sent in money, but I think I don't know how legitimate it was because it hasn't gone anywhere. Those people haven't gotten citizenship or anything. So that one's not taken off. So, and I don't know how legitimate it was, honestly. I know that Ghana, since the year to return, a lot of people have been getting residency or citizenship there. I think it's just a more natural process, but takes longer. Like you have to actually go move there and file paperwork, et cetera, and actually be in country. Whereas with Sierra Leone, it's more you go there, you go through the 9 days of what you need to do. At least that's how the old process. I think they're changing that in 2025, and then at the end of the 9 days, you got your passport. So it's a little bit different, I think, coming forward in 2025. But yeah, I think there are some countries that are starting to look at this. I've heard Nigeria is becoming more open to, like, Nigerian, maybe kids of people who are Nigerian in America, but they're American, but maybe through now their genealogy, they could go back. But I haven't heard the diaspora in general, a bunch of countries opening their arms to it. So, and I'm not sure. Well, yes, I said I'm not sure why, but I have hypothesis is why that is. Because if you look at the news in terms of what's going on in Africa, a lot of the African countries, especially in Western Africa, are kicking out the colonizing countries, especially France. France has been in the news a lot recently, being kicked out by their former West African colonies. So I think it's a situation where the African continent is kind of waking up to say, hey, these people are coming in, taking our resources, and we need to, hold on to what's ours. So I think there's a push and pull in terms of, yeah, they like to have Americans bring that money, but,
right.
Hey, we need to hang on to what's ours. So.
Yeah, a few other countries that I've seen, South Africa, Gabon, Cape Verde, and this was information that was provided in 2023. Zimbabwe,
okay.
Kenya, they have various paths to citizenships that they're offering to African Americans, and I would need to do more research to be more specific. But those are some things that I've seen. And to tie into your point, you and I were talking earlier about, why is it that isn't happening more broadly and more directly? And concerns are, listening to our guest on last week, she mentioned that she's in Ghana, and she mentioned that, she had people say to her, you owe us. You went out and you did well, and you owe us. Yeah, people who said to her, you all, left as slaves, and y'all were living it on the high. Y'all were living the high life on plantations, and we were left here to struggle and deal with colonialism and colonization. And that, first of all, the misinformation is so profound in those statements. Knowing that we have a completely different set of information. It
goes both ways, though, too.
I was going to say,
we think some, all of Africa is just this jungle and lions, and people don't have electricity or running water. Whereas if you go to a city like Nairobi, which is a uber modern, they got all these European like malls, or South Africa, they're pretty modern as well. So, it goes both ways in terms of the misinformation, which is why I wish we could come together as a people to kind of dispel those myths and say, hey, we're hopefully more alike than not alike. And how do we grow together as a people?
We also, I think, sometimes believe when we walk in the door that they're there with arms open saying, come on home. And we are foreigners. we bigger than that, we are Americans. And sometimes those factors stand out more. Dr. Linda's mentioned something here. Many African countries don't allow double citizenship. So when she became a citizen, she had to let go of her Congolese passport. There are places around the world that Dee and I have looked at in terms of would we consider a path to citizenship, and a part of the residency only approach to those countries has been because they want you to relinquish any other passports that you have. Going to Africa is when I said it before, when Dee said, let's let's move abroad. And, I was like, okay, I'm considering that. So we're going to Africa, right? and the research on that process has been enlightening, because again, you come to, we're used to moving across this country through states that act like countries freely. Mm-hmm. And when you say, hey, I'm going to the largest continent, and I've got to look at each place individually, and in each country, it's looking at each country is like looking at America as a whole. Right. And
they're very different countries. Like,
correct,
within Africa, they're very different.
Right, from north to south, from east to west, it's vastly different. Their history, their makeup, their beliefs,
religions,
the religions, their languages.
Yep.
Right, and trying to understand what it is we're going to do and what is required for each process has taken a step back, because you're saying, okay, if I want to do this, how is this going to affect some of the decisions I'm making? And I would need to look at this process for each and every country and do it different for each and every country. Are you looking at more than one place, or are you kind of narrowing down potentially Sierra Leone?
For me, it would be, well, I would say Sierra Leone, and I'm very intrigued by Kenya, and specifically Nairobi. I think I'd like to see Tanzania as well, but if I just had to pick a city, Nairobi right now is high on my radar. Just in terms of some American YouTubers I've watched over there, and they're showing different property. I know myself, and I know my wife. We kind of like modern amenities. So from a Nairobi standpoint, that would be a soft landing. Mm-hmm. However, that would probably be far in the future, because we have so much family still here in the U.S. We want to be closer to this hemisphere in case there's a family emergency. But but in the future, that potentially could be a possibility. And I'm also intrigued with the whole notion that one day maybe Africa will go to a universal passport. So instead of more like the European passport. So when you're in the European Union, if you're a citizen of one, you could move to another one and not have any issue, or at least at a minimum have visa-free travel to any of the African countries if you hold that passport. So that's something that's intriguing that I hope comes along in the future as well.
Okay. How has discovering your ancestry changed your understanding of what is manhood and your role in the African diaspora?
What is manhood? Wow, that's a deep question. What is manhood? It's interesting. Like as I was reading about the Balanta tribe, like they have a rites of passage ceremony where they take the young, I think they're like around 13, the young males, and take them out to the bush, and they do this. The ceremony, I guess, is secret because they don't really tell you what they do, but they're out there for a certain amount of time, and when the young male comes back, he's a man. And so that's interesting. I was like, man, I don't know if we're built for that here in the U.S. The stuff I'm reading about in terms of that, or just how much, I guess, how privileged we are as U.S. citizens, because some of these countries and some of the countries in Western Africa are a lot poorer than what we're used to. So and I know Idris Elba, he just got dual citizenship because his father is from Sierra Leone, but he's taken on this huge project to build this wind energy, clean energy in Sierra Leone. But in terms of manhood, I don't know if it's changed me personally, other than that folks over there now currently, I think, have a much tougher life than even we deal with in a modern situation. So it would be it'd just be a tougher road to hoe in terms of living there, at least in current state. So are you mentally made up for if you say, hey, I'm gonna move from the US to this pretty nice life to, okay, wait a minute, how's the electricity? How's the, where the concrete roads and those sorts of things? It would be different.
One of the things that I think that I've using this word that I've envied from things that I've watched. Again, I've not had a chance yet to immerse myself in the cultures of various cultures enough to speak with any authority, but that there are rituals that, as you mentioned, bring young men into manhood, that are specific, that are, kind of the bar mitzvah kind of concept. You're transitioning from this phase to this phase, your responsibility versus just, you're older now. And so this birthday marks whatever, and that marks birthday marks whatever. There are significant events in life that help shift your value, especially having had sons. I tried to have some level of transitional time with them. And I realized how much I was missing creating that ritualistic maturing aspect for them. My youngest son will be 20 in a little over a month and a half. He, on his 18th birthday, his mother and I took him out just for a little dinner. I come from work. We kind of met up at the same place and we sat down for dinner. I'd probably been there about 5 minutes. We got up. We said, your mom and I are going to go, wash our hands before dinner, look over the menu. And when I came back, sat down to the table, he looked at me and he said, essentially, I'm not ready to be an adult. And he burst into tears, like burst into tears.
How old was he?
This is his 18th birthday.
18th. Okay, gotcha.
And it struck me for two reasons. One, because I clearly wasn't expecting it. Mm-hmm. And he kind of holds his emotions, his tear-based emotions. He is a very expressive young man. He is a very engaging young man, but he just, and I mean, Jice, I'm talking about almost to the point of wailing. He collapsed into my arms at the table in the booth in public, and he doesn't cry a lot in private. The fear of adulting was overwhelming to him. And I knew with my daughter, our oldest, she had some, she was developmentally taking some challenges on, and age was happening to her before she was ready to be that age, that kind of thing.
Right.
He is an attack the world kind of young man. He and our middle son both. And but when I was standing in, it played back on a conversation I had with my two oldest a year prior. I was standing in the kitchen with them and I was telling them what my expectations were. And my son, who at the time was 19, 20, and my daughter was 21 or so. And he said, you're expecting so-and-so. Of course I am. And he said, but we're just kids. And I said, no, baby,
right.
You're not kids. And it touched on how much I realized we are disconnected from some of the traditional ritualistic aspects of our culture. When I watch Asian culture, Indian culture, Latin culture, they have things that they do. Even indigenous peoples in our country, they have things that transition young people into the various aspects of their lives. And, pretty much we are telling our young people, get it together, get your ass in gear and go. And we're watching more and more of our young people not complete college, especially our young men. Not making, fruitful transitions. There are people who feel one way or the other about how much they're at home longer and all of that. And that's individual to each house. But in this process of studying your diaspora, where would you encourage people, especially young men, to evaluate this DNA research history and connecting to our overall history? How would you tie that in?
Wow, that's a deep question. And I don't have kids, so I haven't thought about that from a transition standpoint, it's just me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I'm gonna spin this question a little
Go
bit.
for it.
I think we have gotten away from our traditional kind of values, our the Black church. It seems like it's more fractured now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't live in the same communities generally a lot. We kind of break up. We don't even talk to neighbors these days. If there's anything that's going to come potentially positive out of this next administration, is I think it's going to force us to kind of, as a group of people, take on those values, those traditional values, in terms of, one, if inflation flies through the roof, I think Black families are going to have to come together to say, have intergenerational, because I'm thinking about like the Latin community and the Asian community, how they all kind of, okay, let's squad up and, let's save our money. We're going to divide the expenses to everything. And the older people are revered from that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have to go back to the basics in this new environment for the folks in the USA. So that's one part of the answer. In terms of, and men are gonna have to teach young boys, like, you're gonna have to be independent because you might not get the job because of racism here. So in terms of, you better learn how to grow some food in your backyard.
Mm-hmm.
You better learn how to fix this car. If you can pass those skills on, I would certainly encourage men to try to do that, but have those traditional values. In terms of young men exploring their DNA and saying, hey, there's a bigger world. I want to go somewhere else. I want to see what else is out there. Hey, go for it. In terms of wanting to be a man, I know a lot of folks, encouraging, if a young man doesn't want to go to college, et cetera, hey, the military may be a good option. One, to see the world. Two, to get benefits, but it exposes you to so many other cultures where you're stationed in different places. I wouldn't necessarily say everybody do it, but if somebody, wants that, needs that structure and needs more male role models around them, hey, that may be an option for them. And then eventually, the good news is, if you make it out and, have a 20-year career, you could retire at the age of 40. And then if, as you're exposed to all these different cultures around the world, you may find your bride in the continent of Africa. Hey, I want to find that traditional family structure there. Maybe it's not in the US, but the fact that you've been exposed to other cultures now, and you've seen this more traditional setup. Hey, I think I fit in better in that society than my own. So that could be a way to do it. But I really think, in terms of America, I think we're gonna have to go back to the future in terms of, we got to get more traditional, I think, in this new environment, because I think it's going to be every culture for themselves at this point, with DEI trying to be eradicated, et cetera, and programs that were set up for diverse people. So,
Okay. Has learning about your African heritage had an impact on conversations with your family and your community?
I would say my family, certainly, because they weren't necessarily into the whole Pan-Africanism thing. Mm-hmm. So educating them, I was like, oh, wow. And my sister, I sent her a couple of YouTube videos, especially on the Balanta tribe, because that was the first tribe that I found out we were related to. And she's like, this is very interesting. She's like, they were very independent people, and she kind of sees herself in that light. So definitely. Are you still there? Can we see everybody? Hello, I think we lost. Did we lose them? Let me know if you all can hear me. Herman, there you go.
That's me. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, good answer. Heard most of it. Okay, so has it influenced your perspective on leadership and legacy?
Leadership and legacy. Not necessarily leadership per se, but I would say the legacy piece. The more you know about yourself, I think that always enriches you from a, I guess, a personal development standpoint. And like I said, for me, now I feel like I have a origin story, not knowing that before, just the whole continent. Well, where on the continent? Now I know, okay, there are two specific countries that I would like to visit, to just kind of see where did the Stokes and the Jenkins family originate, or and now I kind of know where those are. So being able to hopefully one day set foot on those countries, that would be powerful.
I hear that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the process in Sierra Leone is beginning to be a little more complex. Is that?
Yes, that is true. Actually, I was on a call early October with the gentleman. He's a director of partnerships for African ancestry, and he was letting us know they were going to do a trip there in, I'm gonna say it was November 24th for 9 days, because we have been waiting to hear everybody who said, hey, we've got our Sierra Leone certificate and we're interested in the process of getting citizenship. They hadn't had another trip since last November of 2023. So typically the trips are arranged in April and November. And so everybody who was trying to go on the April trip was asking, and they said, hey, we're not doing an April trip. We may do the November trip. And consequently got an email, like I said, for an October 3rd conference call, and found out that, hey, we're going to have a trip November 24th for 9 days, but the process was going to change to some extent. And there was a group that actually went, and they thought they were going to get citizenship, but for whatever reason, the government didn't give them the citizenship. So I'm not sure what's going on. I sent them an email before this call, see if I can get any more current information. They don't have any new information. They didn't give them a rationale in terms of why they didn't get citizenship. But on that October call, one of the things they did mention was that going forward in 2025 to get your citizenship, instead of just being a 9-day process, it was going to be, you had to visit the country twice. So I think you were going to have to visit in April as well as November to get it, instead of one visit. So that was the big change I heard about. But again, not sure what happened with the group in November that just went. They did a lot of cultural excursions and whatnot, but they did not successfully get their citizenship like the past groups who had in the prior few years.
Concern, and we shared in conversations you and I were having prior to this, was that somehow it's making the process more difficult.
Yep.
And there could be a number of reasons for that. There could be, making sure that people are committed to the process, but a fear is also that in some degree it's a financial piece. The more you are there, the more you're spending in the economy and an environment, which may or may not be a benefit to you in the long run. As well as, I think somebody said earlier, I always try to do is remember to check my privilege. As non-native Africans, and as Americans in particular, we bring a lot of, or maybe I should say Westerners, we bring a lot of our own stuff to the table. Yep. And fear of, I can't think of a better word, gentrification, might be a concern as well. And again, these are suppositions on my part, just because again, we're making the assumption that hey, you were here, we're here, we're all the same, we look the same, come on over. And you don't like that in your own neighborhood.
I mean, and it's not, to your point, it's not only African countries, I think, going through that. So, with Mexico, every year the financial requirements goes up. I know Panama increased. If you want to do it by investment, it's going to cost another $100,000. And same thing with some of the Caribbean countries. So everybody's ratcheting it up okay, if we're going to let people do it, it's going to either cost more or, it's going to take more, whatever time, maybe time and country requirements, et cetera. So yeah. And I think they had I know they had a presidential change earlier this year. So
Mhm.
that can always do it too. They want to put their own spin on it. So,
Right.
hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're gonna reevaluate and change it, and we'll let you know. I would just say anybody who's looking to do Sierra Leone specifically, what I probably would say is, if you just want to go, a cultural visit, then hey, I would say go with that lens versus the citizenship at this point, until you see another group of people successfully get it. So I would really say that should be your aim more so than the citizenship. It's kind of a wait and see take at this point. So
I definitely would encourage doing your due diligence, putting in the research if
yes,
that's
yep,
something of interest. So if you have to pull the trigger on it quickly, you have an idea of what it is you're doing and moving forward. As Jice said, as you said, that everywhere is changing. We got our first residency approval 2 years ago, and that process, and just financially what they're expecting, what's available and the time frames has changed dramatically in just 2 years. And it was dramatically different than the 2 years prior to that when we got ours. So I mean, everything is shifting. But as we as African Americans are becoming more globally engaged, and the history that comes with us, both real and perceived. Because we talked about that perception just in Africa, with Africans alone. The world shifts and changes as it perceives what's going to happen in its communities, in its environments. But
to your point, though, what I would say is, if you do your due diligence and research and you see something you do want to apply for and you vet it, yes, it's happening, and as much as you humanly can do, I would also encourage people, don't wait, because the programs will change. So it's kind of get in where you fit in. If you see something you want to go for, don't say, oh, I'm gonna do it 2 years from now. If you have the ability to do it, I would say, hey, go for it, because something could the people who got in the last 2 years, they've got their 5-year passport and they're living life and doing their thing in Sierra Leone or going back and forth, etc. Now I don't know what's gonna happen at the end of those 5 years, but they got in while they could, and some of them set up businesses over there, moved over there. So
and I would definitely take advantage of these community engagements. As you see here with the Takinde Travel and Jice in the conversation, they're explaining their lineage and history and how it's affected their citizenship options as they've moved around as Native American and Native Africans. And those bits of information, when the due diligence is done, helps to shape how you make decisions. Let's see, got a couple more questions here. Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. So here's a male question.
Okay.
What role do you see the African ancestry playing in healing the historical disconnection Black men have faced?
Wow. I really do think, as Black men, we gotta continue the legacy of, to your point, like future generations. Teach them, one, their family history, two, teach them the skill sets they're going to need to survive in this world. And in terms of that, prior generations, teach them about their great grandfather, where they came from, etc. Because if we don't, no one else will. You see what's going on in the U.S. now. They're getting Black history taking it out of schools and states and everything else. So if we don't teach our own history, no one else is going to do it for us. We can't really depend. I was telling my sister, she got a 5-year-old daughter, and I'm like, you need to almost homeschool a girl, because Florida's not going to do it. I was like researching African, because I know there's a classmate, a FAMU classmate in Miami who teaches African curriculum to teach kids their history, and they have summer camps. I say, you need to get with your girl Talitha, because I know she has a curriculum for kids. And she's like, I'm gonna do that. But to your point, I think it's up to us. We got to help ourselves. We're our biggest resource, and if you don't know how to do it, partner with a brother who does. If you can't fix a car or change a tire or whatever, okay, I don't have the skills, but I got this boy I need to raise. Okay, hey, neighbor, can you teach him, or somebody at church teach him? I mean, it's that whole familial. Each one teach one. If I don't have the skill, I always say I may not know the answer, but I know someone else who knows the answer, so I can get to the answer some kind of way. So I think that's what we're going to have to do, and that crosses those intergenerational bridges. It's just keep teaching the future generations.
And to tie into that, having had a mother as an educator, as a teacher, I also want to remind, especially those of us who are Native Americans, to use that as a phrase, the education of your children, and I use that in the complete sense, is still yours first.
Yes.
We've gotten used to dropping our kids off at school and then being upset because the teacher didn't teach whatever. I think those of us who've had an opportunity to be more successful in life, we learned the majority of things we learned at home. We gained that information at home. And it wasn't just the foundation; it was continual through our lives. We had gotten into, understandably, phobias of having our kids engage with people because of harm that has come to children. But if you are an interactive part of that social engagement and that circle, it reduces the harm that can come to your children and to your family and their future. Unfortunately, life being what it is, you risk a risk. But I think when we don't community educate on a continual basis, we stunt growth. And when we aren't a part of that community engagement, we also stunt growth. So I think that's viable, what you said. I agree with that. How has this journey affected your sense of purpose at this point in your life?
I think, and this goes back to our channel, GenX Quench. You reach a certain stage in life where you want more from life than just being on the hamster wheel. So you thirst for something, and for me, it's really exploration. Exploration about self, exploration about other cultures, exploration about the world. So that in this next phase of life, that's what I want to quench in terms of, and satiate is let's see the world. Let's not stay in our normal 9 to 5, humdrum lives. Let's go see what's out there and chase it. So I think that's what this process has really done. It's just opened up another avenue. And I would say for those of you maybe who haven't traveled, that's your biggest educator. Is see the world. You'll learn so much more. I mean, and just a simple example, people think, oh, the U.S. has the best healthcare in the world. At least that's what they tell you. You go somewhere else, you say, well, wait a minute, the drugs are cheaper here. Wait a minute, they do house calls here too. And wait a minute, the total cost is just like the cost of a copay. And I'm not going to get a bill, 2 weeks later for another $100. I mean, it's like when you really start going other places and see how other parts of the world do things, your eyes really become open. So I consider myself a lifelong learner. So I just want to keep exploring the world and keep learning through this experience.
Last question. Yep. What message would you share with other people, Black men in particular, who might be hesitant to explore their DNA connections to Africa?
I would say, again, I don't know if it's a fear factor or what's causing the hesitancy, but what have you got to lose by learning from which you came? Learn the history, okay, here's where they originate. Here's the history of how they got here. Here's the language they speak now. You may want to learn a new language because of it, because if Guinea-Bissau had been the only country I originated from, I was going to start taking Portuguese lessons. So when I got over there, I could communicate with the people, at least basic to some extent. But I mean, you just learn so much from knowing who you are and from whence you came. So there's nothing. I don't think there's anything negative to come from that experience. It's just you just open up a new piece of the puzzle in terms of who you are and who your people are.
Jice has two comments I want to share. This goes to what we've been saying. We hope that it becomes easier across the continent to not only find your ancestry, but to move into possible citizenship with that, because it will benefit us as both countries.
Yeah,
the diaspora is so broad, and we're in parts of Europe, we're in the Caribbean, we're
South America.
People understand deeply in Central and South America, that they are deeply in Mexico and Central and Panama, all the way down through Brazil. We are deep in those areas, as well as those of us in Africa, in America, and in Canada, and of course the continent itself. And we are a diverse people who are way too disconnected.
But it is interesting because even though we're disconnected, I still see similarities.
Oh, absolutely.
Culturally. Like when I went to Panama, and the people were just so warm, and I'm like watching them at their church service, and I'm watching them dance. I can see, although it's different, it's the same. It's like, right. It's that same family reunion kind of feeling. So
we often, I think, see ourselves in other cultures. Like I can see us here in Costa Rica, but that's not because they're different from us. The trick for us is the browner the skin. Are we spending the same time trying to connect that history together? I know a lot of people chasing their Latin history. I know a lot of people chasing their European history, and a lot of people, I'm speaking Blacks in particular, chasing their Native. Oh man, we chase down our Native American history. Like man, that's we put our backpacks on and we go out into the woods like we foraging for mushrooms. Right. But putting in the time to say which tribe did I come from? What's the information about my history? How does that affect the way I think, my well-being, my health, my build? Right. I've been built like this in life. Is this because there's something wrong with me, or is this a heritage thing? Is there something to support that? As a culinarian, I talk all the time about not being connected to foods that are directly related to our background. Mm-hmm. Our foods are a cornucopia of histories of cross colonizations that include some lineage of Africa, but they're not, African food. You know what I'm saying? There are pieces of it that we can recognize, but that disjoint. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
You reminded me of something, but when I was researching the Balanta people and their history, one of the references was saying they believed that they migrated from Egypt over to West Africa because they were being chased by another group of people. But anyway, they ended up going to West Africa to basically get away from them. But I'm like, man. So I said, if these folks actually came from Egypt, they could have been the ones helping engineer the pyramids or whatever stuff you read about in books. I was like, I may have a connection to that some kind of way. But, if you don't know that history, in terms of, and how good this group was resistant to slavery. Like they would hide from the slave catchers and stuff like that. And if you don't have that history and that pride, and being able to pass that down to your kids, then they just gonna go along with the flow, let folks run over them. Do you know you come from a proud people that resisted, slave catchers? And not only that, they helped, engineer the pyramids, whatever those stories are, that's how you connect the diaspora and the stories and keep the history alive. So
and And to the point of those who are saying, we made this, we built this, we ought to stay here, to the point of that, we also need to do better at reclaiming, taking notice of our heritage and history in the States. What we created, what we instituted, what is influenced by us, the music, the architecture, the
plasma,
technology,
blood plasma, just so many things. The stoplight,
correct.
The engineering of Washington D.C.
Absolutely,
all
those things that
right.
If we start to reclaim those things that are close to home, then maybe we'll put more effort in reclaiming the things that are abroad in the world that are a part of us as well.
Exactly.
I appreciate you being here with us today, Jice, and for helping me, move to this conversation without the smart lady next to me. As for those of you who weren't here earlier, she's taking a little breather today. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say I'll have to bring my better half the next time you bring yours, and we'll find something to talk about.
We'll find something to talk about. Yeah. This is Jice of GenX Quench. His information is in the description. Please go over to his page and subscribe to the channel that he shares with his lovely wife, Lynn. And
appreciate it.
I appreciate all of you who've been in the conversation with us today. This has been a learning experience for me. Hit the like button, hit the like button, hit the like button. Share. If you're here from the future, you're new to our channel, please subscribe. And we'll be doing a series, as I said, over the next several weeks on Africa itself. We're talking to several people who are visiting, engaging, living, moving, the whole kit and caboodle. Dee and I are continuing our travel abroad, and we will be putting out content about this beautiful Costa Rica as we move to our next country starting tomorrow. Check us on Instagram. We did a little bit of a live this morning. As always, we're H&D Abroad. We're glad that you hit us today. We'll see you in a little bit.
Have a good one.